The fluorescent lights hummed like dying insects above the execution chamber. 11:47 p.m. 3 minutes until justice would be served, or so they thought. Marcus Kane lay strapped to the gurney, his weathered hands secured with leather restraints that had held 127 men before him. The needle waited in his left arm, a silver messenger of state-sanctioned death. But Marcus wasn't looking at the IV line or the observation window, where victims' families pressed their faces against bulletproof glass, hungry for closure. His eyes were locked on justice. The German shepherd sat motionless beside Warden Patterson. Those amber eyes that had once tracked down escaped convicts, now fixed on the man who had been his partner for 8 years. Justice's black coat gleamed under the harsh lights, every muscle coiled like a loaded spring. The dog's breathing was shallow, controlled, the way Marcus had trained him before everything went to hell. "Any last words, Kane?" Warden Patterson's voice cut through the sterile air like a rusty blade. Marcus turned his head slightly, just enough to meet Justice's gaze. For a moment the chamber fell away. No witnesses, no cameras, no countdown to death. Just a man and his dog, connected by something deeper than training or loyalty. Then Marcus whispered. The words were so quiet that the microphone didn't catch them. The lip readers in the media section couldn't make them out. But Justice heard every syllable, and his entire body went rigid. The dog's ears snapped forward, then flattened against his skull. A low whine escaped his throat, not the trained alert Marcus had taught him, but something primal, something afraid. Justice began backing away from the chamber. What the hell? Guard Rodriguez stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. Justice had never retreated from anything, not from armed suspects, not from explosives, not from death itself. But now the dog was moving backward, his claws clicking against the polished concrete floor, leaving behind scratches that would take weeks to buff out. His eyes never left Marcus, but his body was screaming a message no one understood. Danger. Run. Hide. Warden Patterson held up his hand, halting the countdown. Control your animal, Martinez. K9. Officer Martinez knelt beside Justice, confused. Justice, heel. Justice, sit. The commands bounced off the dog like rain off stone. Justice continued backing up until his hindquarters hit the chamber wall. Then he began to howl. The sound that erupted from Justice's throat was nothing like his training howls or alert barks. This was the cry of something wild and desperate, a sound that seemed to claw its way up from his very soul. The pitch was wrong, too high, too human, too much like sirens. The howl echoed off the chamber walls, bouncing between concrete and steel until it became a symphony of warning. Justice's head was thrown back, his muzzle pointed toward the ceiling, and that impossible sound just kept coming. Every person in the chamber froze. Guard Rodriguez's hand stopped halfway to his radio. Warden Patterson's finger hovered over the execution button. The witnesses pressed closer to the glass, their breath fogging the surface as they strained to understand what they were seeing. But it was Dr. Sarah Chen who went white as bone. She stood in the front row of the witness section, her medical examiner's badge catching the light as her hands began to tremble. That howl, she'd heard it before. 8 months ago, when flames had licked the sky and Justice had stood over her partner's body, making that exact same sound. The night Marcus Kane murdered Detective Tommy Rodriguez. The night everything changed, but something was wrong with the narrative they'd all accepted. Justice was staring at Marcus with recognition, yes, but not the recognition of betrayal. The dog's eyes held the same desperate urgency they'd held that night when he'd tried to warn them about the bomb no one had found, the bomb that was supposedly a hallucination brought on by Marcus's breakdown. Justice's howl crescendoed, and suddenly his paws were scrabbling against the wall behind him. Not random scratching, purposeful movement. His claws found purchase on something that shouldn't have been there, a hairline crack in the concrete, barely visible to the human eye. Warden Patterson stepped closer. What is he? Justice's paw pressed against the crack, and a section of the wall shifted inward with a soft click. Behind it, a space that shouldn't exist, a hollow that had been hidden for months. Inside that hollow was a small device with a blinking red light. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft electronic beeping that had been masked by the building's ventilation system. A sound they'd all heard but dismissed as normal background noise. A timer. Guard Rodriguez grabbed his radio. "We need the bomb squad, now." But justice wasn't done. The dog spun toward Marcus, his body language shifting from warning to something else. Something that looked almost like forgiveness. Marcus was staring at the hidden device with tears streaming down his face. "You found it," he whispered to Justice. "You finally found it." The pieces weren't fitting together the way they should. Marcus Kane was supposed to be a killer, a dirty cop who'd snapped and murdered his partner. But Justice was acting like Marcus was the victim. Dr. Chen pressed her palms against the observation window. 8 months ago, she'd watched Marcus kneel over Tommy's body, while Justice howled warnings no one understood. She'd assumed the dog was mourning his fallen handler's partner. What if Justice had been trying to tell them something else entirely? What if the real killer had never been caught? The beeping was getting faster. Warden Patterson's voice cracked as he spoke into his headset. "Evacuate the chamber. Evacuate now." But Marcus shook his head, his eyes still locked on Justice. "No." "Time," he said quietly. "How long, boy, how long do we have?" Justice barked once, sharp, clear. 1 minute. 1 minute. The chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Guards rushed toward the exits while Martinez tried to leash Justice, but the dog wouldn't move. He planted himself between Marcus and the hidden bomb, his body a living shield. Dr. Chen was screaming, something through the glass, pounding on the bulletproof surface with her fists, but her words were lost in the alarm bells that had begun shrieking throughout the facility. Marcus looked at Justice one last time. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect him," he whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't save Tommy." Justice's tail moved once, a tiny wag that somehow contained forgiveness, understanding and goodbye. The beeping stopped. For one perfect, terrible second, the world held its breath. Then the hidden device began to emit a different sound, a high-pitched whine that spoke of circuits charging and countdown timers reaching 0. But instead of an explosion, there was a click, a soft mechanical click that meant the device had disarmed itself. In the sudden silence, Justice walked over to Marcus and gently licked his hand. The real story was just beginning. 8 months earlier, the scent hit Justice before his human partner. Noticed anything wrong? Metallic, sharp, wrong. The German shepherd's nose twitched as he padded through the warehouse district beside Detective Marcus Kane, their breath creating small clouds in the October air. Marcus was thinking about Sarah Chen, not Dr. Sarah Chen from the medical examiner's office. That was a different Sarah, one who would later stand witness to his supposed crimes. This Sarah was Detective Sarah Chen, his partner of 3 years, who had the unfortunate habit of making Marcus's pulse quicken every time she smiled. "Focus, Kane," he muttered to himself, adjusting Justice's tactical vest. The K9 unit had been his life for 5 years, ever since he'd transferred from narcotics. Justice had been a rescue, a military working dog whose handler had died in Afghanistan. The partnership had been rocky at first. Justice didn't trust easily, and Marcus had his own walls, but walls had a way of crumbling when you depended on each other for survival. Justice's ears twitched forward, alert posture. Marcus felt it too now, that electric tension that meant they weren't alone in the maze of empty warehouses. Intel said Tommy Rodriguez was meeting his informant here. Dirty money, dirty cops, dirty secrets that went all the way to the top of the department. Tommy Rodriguez. Marcus's friend since the academy, his best man at his ex-wife's wedding, the guy who'd held him together when the divorce papers came through. Tommy, who'd been acting strange for weeks, paranoid, scared. Tommy, who might be stealing from evidence. "Lock up, Justice, heel." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. The dog fell into step beside him, moving like a shadow through the maze of shipping containers and abandoned forklifts. The warehouse at the end of the row had been empty for years, but there was a car parked outside. Not Tommy's sedan, but a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed federal plates or organized crime. In this neighborhood, either option was bad news. Marcus's radio crackled softly. "Kane, this is Chen. Rodriguez isn't answering his radio. You got eyes on the meat? He pressed the transmit button twice. Silent acknowledgement. Justice was already moving toward the warehouse's side entrance, his nose working overtime. The dog's body language was wrong, not the focused intensity of tracking a suspect, but something else, something that looked like fear. Justice had never been afraid of anything. The warehouse door was ajar, not a good sign. Marcus drew his weapon and felt Justice's warmth pressed against his left leg, the position they'd trained for high-risk entries. Together, they'd cleared dozens of buildings, drug houses, kidnapping scenes, armed robbery suspects holed up in basements and attics. This felt different. Justice whined, so quietly Marcus almost missed it. The dog was staring at the door like it might bite him. His usually perfect posture was coiled, ready to bolt. "What is it, boy?" Marcus knelt beside his partner, running his hand along Justice's neck. The dog's fur was standing on end and his heart was racing. "Talk to me." Justice's amber eyes met his, and Marcus saw something that chilled him to the bone. Recognition. The dog knew whatever was in that warehouse, and it terrified him. But they had a job to do. Marcus pushed the door open with his foot, weapon raised. The warehouse was a cavern of shadows and dust motes, dancing in shafts of light from broken windows. Shipping containers were stacked like metallic mountains, creating a labyrinth of hiding spots and blind corners. Justice's nose was working frantically now, processing scents Marcus couldn't even imagine. The dog's training kicked in despite his fear. He was mapping the space, identifying threats, cataloging everything that didn't belong. Then they heard the voices. Two men speaking in hushed tones, somewhere in the maze of containers. Marcus couldn't make out words, but the tone was wrong, urgent, angry. He moved forward, Justice ghosting beside him. The dog's paws made no sound on the concrete floor, a skill that had taken months of training to perfect. They approached the voices like smoke, invisible and deadly. "Told you the dog will be a problem," one voice was saying, gravelly, older, not Tommy's voice. "Then we handle the dog," another voice replied. This one Marcus recognized, and his blood went cold. Captain Morrison, his boss, the man who'd recommended him for the K9 unit. "Rodriguez is already spooked. If he sees us here, Rodriguez won't be seeing anything much longer." Marcus felt Justice go rigid beside him. The dog had heard it too, the casual mention of murder delivered like a weather report. They were around the corner from the voices, now hidden behind a shipping container marked with Chinese characters. Justice's nose was twitching frantically. He was picking up scents that were telling him a story Marcus couldn't read. But the dog's body language was screaming danger in every line of his posture. Marcus peered around the container and saw them. Captain Morrison stood beside a folding table covered with evidence bags. Not just any evidence, drug money from the Castellano case that should have been in lockup. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that was supposed to be processed and stored as evidence. Beside Morrison was a man Marcus didn't recognize. Expensive suit, dead eyes, and hands that had clearly seen violence. Between them sat Tommy Rodriguez, duct-taped to a metal chair. Tommy was alive, but barely. His face was a mess of bruises and blood, and his eyes held the glassy look of someone who'd been beaten past the point of clear thinking. He was trying to say something through the tape over his mouth, but the sounds were muffled and desperate. Morrison checked his watch. 5 more minutes, then we clean this up. Make it look like a drug deal gone wrong." Justice was trembling beside Marcus. Not from fear, from rage. The dog had identified Tommy as pack, as family. Seeing him hurt was triggering every protective instinct Justice possessed. Marcus needed backup. He needed to call this in. But his radio would make noise, and they were outnumbered and outgunned. He was reaching for his phone when Justice made the decision for both of them. The dog bolted from their hiding spot, 100 pounds of trained fury heading straight for Morrison. Justice didn't bark. He'd been trained for silent takedowns, but his paws thundered against the concrete like war drums. Morrison spun, going for his weapon, but Justice was already airborne. The dog's jaws clamped down on Morrison's gun hand with surgical precision, sending the weapon clattering across the floor. The man in the expensive suit had faster reflexes. His gun was out, and aimed at Justice before Marcus could clear the corner. "No!" Marcus's shout echoed through the warehouse as he raised his own weapon, but the stranger wasn't aiming at Justice. He was aiming at the device strapped under the folding table, a device with wires and a digital display that Marcus had somehow missed in his initial assessment. A bomb. The stranger's bullet found its mark, but instead of detonating the device, it sparked against metal plating. The bomb was shielded, designed to withstand accidental damage, but the shot had triggered something else. A timer that began counting down from 60 seconds. Justice released Morrison and spun toward the device, his training warring with panic. He'd been taught to detect explosives, to alert to their presence. But he'd never been taught what to do when the bomb was already armed and counting down. Morrison was clutching his mangled hand, blood streaming between his fingers. "You've killed us all, Kane. That device is tied to the structural supports." "This whole warehouse comes down." The stranger was already running for the exit. Tommy was still tied to the chair, his eyes wide with terror above the duct tape. 55 seconds. Marcus ran to Tommy, his hands shaking as he tried to cut through the tape. Justice was circling the bomb, whining with frustration. The dog knew it was dangerous. His training was screaming at him to alert and back away. But his pack was in danger, and every instinct told him to protect them. 50 seconds. The tape around Tommy's wrists was industrial strength, designed to hold. Marcus's tactical knife was sharp, but not sharp enough. He could feel precious seconds ticking away as he sawed through layer after layer. Justice barked once, a sharp alert that meant he'd found something. The dog was pawing at the base of the bomb, his claws scratching against what looked like a removable panel. 45 seconds, Morrison was stumbling toward the exit, leaving a trail of blood. "There's no time, Kane, leave him!" But Marcus had never left a partner behind. He wouldn't start with Tommy. The last of the tape parted, and Tommy slumped forward, gasping. Marcus caught him, feeling how much weight his friend had lost. Tommy's lips were moving, trying to form words around a mouthful of blood and broken teeth. 40 seconds, can't... "Disarm," Tommy whispered. "Remote. Detonator." Justice barked again, more urgently. He'd managed to work the panel open with his claws, revealing a nest of wires and circuit boards that might as well have been alien technology to Marcus's eyes. But Justice was still pawing at something, not the wires, something else. A small device attached to the bomb's housing with magnetic clamps. 35 seconds. Marcus looked closer and felt his heart stop. It was a secondary timer. A backup detonator that someone could trigger remotely if the primary timer was disabled. Someone like the man in the expensive suit, who was probably halfway to his car by now. Someone who wanted to make sure there were no witnesses to what had happened in this warehouse. 30 seconds. Tommy grabbed Marcus's arm with surprising strength. "Sarah," he gasped. "Sarah knows and told her everything, and if something happened..." Detective Sarah Chen. Marcus's partner had been working with Tommy on this investigation. She was probably sitting in her car outside right now, waiting for their signal that the operation was complete. Justice made a sound Marcus had never heard before, a howl that seemed to come from his very soul. The dog was staring at the bomb's display with an intelligence that went beyond training. 25 seconds, and suddenly Marcus understood what Justice was trying to tell him. The bomb wasn't just set to destroy the warehouse. It was designed to level the entire block. Sarah was in the blast radius. "Justice, find Sarah," Marcus commanded. "Find Sarah." The dog's ears perked up at the familiar name. He'd met Detective Chen dozens of times, had been trained to track her scent as a friendly. Justice looked from Marcus to the bomb to the warehouse exit, his entire body vibrating with indecision. 20 seconds. Stay with Pack. Protect Pack. But save Pack meant leaving Pack. Justice made his choice. He bolted for the exit, his paws finding purchase on the smooth concrete as he raced against time itself. Marcus could hear him howling as he ran, not alerting but calling to Sarah to run, to get away, to understand that death was coming and she needed to move. 15 seconds. Marcus looked at Tommy, who was barely conscious. No way to carry him, no way to outrun the blast. But maybe, just maybe, he could shield his friend from the worst of it. He pulled Tommy behind the thickest shipping container he could see and covered him with his own body, just as Justice's howls reached a crescendo outside. 10 seconds. Car doors slamming, engine starting. Justice had found Sarah and she was listening. 5 seconds. Marcus closed his eyes and whispered a prayer for his dog, his partner, and his friend. 4, 3, 2, 1. The warehouse disappeared in fire and thunder, taking Marcus Kane's old life with it. Present day, county lockup 2 days before execution. Justice hadn't eaten in 3 days. Tyne. Officer Martinez crouched beside the German Shepherd's kennel, worry etching lines around his eyes. "Come on, boy, you've got to eat something." The dog lay on his side, amber eyes fixed on the concrete wall as if he could see through it to the death row cells beyond. His breathing was shallow, controlled, the way a soldier might breathe before a battle he knew he wouldn't survive. "He's been like this since they moved Kane to Death Watch," Martinez explained to Dr. Sarah Chen, who stood outside the kennel with a clipboard full of questions no one wanted to answer. Dr. Chen, not Detective Chen, who had died in the warehouse explosion 8 months ago, but Dr. Sarah Chen from the medical examiner's office, who had been dragged into this mess by virtue of sharing a name with the dead. She'd been the one to examine the bodies pulled from the rubble. She'd been the one to declare that the explosive device found in the wreckage matched materials stolen from a police evidence locker. She'd been the one to help build the case that put Marcus Kane on death row. "Has he shown any signs of illness?" Dr. Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd been studying justice for weeks, trying to understand how a dog could become such a crucial witness in a murder trial. "Physically, he's fine," Martinez replied. "But mentally, I've never seen anything like it. It's like he's mourning something that hasn't happened yet." Justice's ear twitched at the sound of footsteps in the corridor beyond the kennel. His head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as he processed scents that told him stories the humans couldn't read. Then he went back to staring at the wall, but his breathing had changed. Faster now. Anxious. Dr. Chen made a note on her clipboard. "What happens to him after the execution?" Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "Standard protocol is retirement to a civilian family. Justice is only 6 years old. He's got a lot of good years left." But they both knew that wasn't the real answer. Justice was famous now, the dog who had allegedly witnessed his handler's partner commit murder. The dog whose testimony, if a dog could testify, had helped convict Marcus Kane of Detective Tommy Rodriguez's death. No family would want that kind of notoriety. "There's something else," Martinez said, lowering his voice. "Justice has been responding to things that aren't there." Dr. Chen looked up from her clipboard. "What do you mean?" "Watch." Martinez walked to the far end of the kennel block and whistled softly. "Justice, patrol." The command should have gotten the dog's attention immediately. Patrol was basic training, muscle memory. But Justice didn't move. Then Martinez tried something different. He called out in a voice that mimicked Marcus Kane's cadence and tone. "Justice, search." The dog was on his feet instantly, ears forward, body alert. He moved to the front of his kennel and began working his nose along the gap beneath the door, clearly searching for a scent he expected to find. "He only responds to commands when they sound like Kane's voice," Martinez explained. "It's like he's waiting for his real handler to come back." Dr. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. "How long has he been doing this?" "Since the day after. Kane was arrested, but it's getting worse. Yesterday I found him scratching at the wall between here and death row, scratching so hard his paws were bleeding. The scratching. Dr. Chen had heard about that from the death row guards. They'd complained about noise coming from the wall that separated the K9 kennels from the condemned cells, a persistent scratching. That seemed to happen only at night, when the facility was quiet enough to hear a dog's claws against concrete. "Show me," she said. Martinez led her to the far wall of Justice's kennel. Sure enough, there were scratches in the concrete, deep gouges that spoke of desperate, sustained effort, but the pattern was wrong. The scratches weren't random. They formed shapes, lines that almost looked like letters, Dr. Chen whispered. Martinez leaned closer. What? The scratches, they're not random. Look. Dr. Chen traced the gouges with her finger. This could be a T, and this looks like an M. Tommy Martinez. Tommy Rodriguez's name, carved into concrete by a dog who shouldn't have understood the concept of written language, or maybe not letters at all. Maybe just the desperate scratching of an animal trying to dig through a wall to reach his pack. But as Dr. Chen stared at the marks, she couldn't shake the feeling that justice was trying to tell them something. Something about the night detective. Rodriguez died. Something about what really happened in that warehouse. Has anyone run a full forensic analysis on these scratches? She asked. Martinez shook his head. They're just dog scratches. What would be the point? Dr. Chen was about to answer when Justice suddenly went rigid. Every muscle in his body tensed, and his ears swiveled toward the corridor like satellite. Dishes tracking a signal, footsteps, heavy boots on concrete, the measured pace of guards escorting a prisoner. Justice began to whine, a sound so full of longing and desperation that it made Dr. Chen's chest ache. The dog pressed himself against the kennel door, his entire body vibrating with the need to move, to follow, to protect. They're moving Kane to the death chamber for final prep, Martinez said quietly. Justice always knows, even when we don't announce it. He knows. The whining grew louder, more urgent. Justice was pawing at the kennel door now, his claws scrabbling for purchase on the smooth metal. His amber eyes were fixed on the corridor, tracking movement he couldn't see but could clearly hear. Then the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Justice's whining cut off abruptly, and he tilted his head as if listening to something beyond human hearing. That's not right, Martinez muttered. They should be halfway to death row by now. Through the walls, they could hear raised voices. Not shouting, but the kind of urgent, controlled communication that meant something had gone wrong. Justice began backing away from the kennel door, not retreating, positioning himself. His body language had shifted from desperate longing to something else, something that looked like preparation for battle. Dr. Chen's radio crackled to life. All units, we have a situation in Corridor C. Prisoner Kane is requesting to see the K9. Repeat, prisoner is asking for justice. Martinez and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. It was unprecedented. Death row inmates weren't allowed contact with animals, especially not police K9s. The liability issues alone would keep the request from being approved, but justice was already moving. The dog had somehow worked the latch on his kennel door, a trick he'd never demonstrated before, and was padding down the corridor toward the sounds of activity. His gait was purposeful, controlled. He wasn't running toward Marcus Kane. He was walking like a soldier reporting for duty. Justice, return, Martinez called, but the dog didn't even acknowledge the command. Dr. Chen found herself following, drawn by the same inexplicable pull that seemed to be guiding Justice. The dog led them through a maze of corridors she'd never seen before, past security checkpoints that should have been locked, but somehow stood open. It was as if the building itself was conspiring to bring them together. They found Marcus Kane sitting in a holding cell between the general population and death row. He was flanked by 4 guards, all of whom looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. Kane himself appeared calm, calmer than a man facing execution had any right to be. When Justice rounded the corner, Marcus looked up and smiled. It wasn't the smile of a killer seeing his victim. It was the smile of a man seeing his best friend after a long separation. "Hello, boy," Marcus said softly. Justice approached the cell bars without hesitation. He sat directly in front of Marcus, his posture perfect, professional. Alert but not aggressive, ready for orders. "Sir, this is highly irregular," one of the guards began, but Marcus held up his hand. "I just need a minute," he said. "I just need to tell him goodbye." Dr. Chen watched from the corridor as man and dog regarded each other through steel bars. There was something in their interaction that didn't fit the narrative she'd helped construct. Justice wasn't looking at Marcus with fear or anger. He was looking at him with trust, complete, absolute trust. "Justice," Marcus said quietly. "Do you remember what I taught you about finding things that are hidden?" The dog's ears perked up. His head tilted slightly, the universal canine gesture for "I'm listening." Some things get buried so deep that nobody thinks to look for them, Marcus continued. But you're good at finding buried things, aren't you, boy? Justice's tail moved. Once. A single wag that seemed to say yes. Dr. Chen felt her breath catch. She'd studied the warehouse explosion scene herself. She'd examined every piece of evidence, every scrap of debris. But what if they'd missed something? What if there was evidence buried so deep in the rubble that no one had thought to look? Evidence that might change everything. Marcus reached through the bars, a violation of protocol that should have gotten him tased, and gently touched Justice's nose. "Find it, boy," he whispered. "Find what they buried." Justice stood, turned, and walked directly to Dr. Chen. The dog sat at her feet and looked up at her with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. His expression was clear, unmistakable. "Help." Dr. Chen's office. That evening, the evidence box sat on Dr. Chen's desk like Pandora's container, waiting to spill secrets that might be better left buried. Inside were photographs, forensic reports, and fragments of debris from the warehouse explosion, everything that had been used to build the case against Marcus Kane. Justice lay beside her chair, his chin resting on his paws as he watched her work. She'd signed him out as a consultation on animal behavior evidence, a bureaucratic fiction that gave her 24 hours with the dog before anyone started asking uncomfortable questions. "Okay, boy," she said, spreading crime scene photographs across her desk. "Show me what I missed." Justice lifted his head and began examining the photos with an intensity that seemed almost human. His nose worked carefully over each image, processing information that existed beyond the visual spectrum. The first few photos were standard documentation: the warehouse exterior, the blast pattern, the crater where the explosive device had detonated. Justice showed no interest in these, but when Dr. Chen laid out the interior shots, pictures of the blast zone taken from different angles, the dog went rigid. He pawed at one specific photograph, not aggressively, but with the careful precision of a trained search animal indicating a find. Dr. Chen looked closer. The photo showed the northwestern corner of the warehouse, where the shipping containers had been stacked. Most of them had been thrown like toys by the explosion, but a few remained standing in the background. "What is it, Justice? What do you see?" The dog continued pawing at the same spot in the photograph. Dr. Chen grabbed a magnifying glass and examined the area more closely. There, in the shadow between two containers, barely visible in the smoke and debris, something that didn't belong. A rectangular shape that could have been anything. A fallen beam, a piece of machinery, another shipping container, or a vehicle. Dr. Chen felt her pulse quicken. She pulled up the digital files on her computer and enhanced the image, pushing the resolution until pixels became visible. The rectangular shape had lines that were too clean, too geometric to be debris. "It's a van," she whispered. Justice's tail wagged once. Confirmation. Dr. Chen grabbed her phone and speed-dialed the evidence clerk. "This is Dr. Chen. I need the complete inventory from the warehouse explosion. Everything that was catalogued at the scene." While she waited, she studied the photograph again. The van was parked behind the containers, hidden from the main warehouse floor where the explosion had occurred. Its position suggested it had been there before the blast, possibly for hours, which meant someone else had been at the scene. Someone who hadn't appeared in any witness statements or police reports. The evidence clerk called back 20 minutes, later with information that made Dr. Chen's blood run cold. No vehicles had been found in the warehouse debris. The van in the photograph had simply vanished. "That's impossible," she told Justice. "A vehicle doesn't just disappear from a crime scene." But as she thought about it, she realized it wasn't impossible at all. The warehouse explosion had attracted every emergency responder in the county. Fire trucks, ambulances, police units, federal investigators. In the chaos of rescue operations and evidence collection, a single van could have driven away unnoticed, especially if it belonged to someone who was supposed to be there. Justice was on his feet now, pacing beside her desk. His agitation was growing, and Dr. Chen could see the same desperate energy that had driven him to scratch through concrete walls. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked. "More that we missed?" She spread out additional photographs, and Justice, immediately focused on a shot of the warehouse's eastern wall. This time, his pawing was more urgent, almost frantic. Dr. Chen enhanced the image and felt her world tilt sideways. There, barely visible in the debris, was a piece of metal with markings on it. Not random blast damage, but deliberate scoring. Letters that had been etched into steel before the explosion. SC. If something happens, check the... The rest was obscured by rubble, but Dr. Chen didn't need to see more. SC Detective Sarah Chen, Marcus Kane's partner who had died in the explosion. Sarah had left a message that suggested she'd known something was going to happen to her. Dr. Chen's hands were shaking as she reached for her phone. She needed to call this in, needed to report that they'd missed crucial evidence, but something held her back. A nagging feeling that she was still missing pieces of the puzzle. Justice seemed to sense her hesitation. The dog walked to the office door and looked back at her expectantly. "You want to go somewhere," she said. "You want to show me something." Justice's tail wagged. Not the excited wag of a dog going for a walk, but the controlled response of a working animal, acknowledging a correct interpretation of his signals. Dr. Chen grabbed her keys and followed Justice out of the building. The dog led her to her car and sat beside the passenger door waiting. "This is crazy," she muttered as she let him into the vehicle. "I'm taking investigative advice from a German shepherd." But as they drove through the city, Dr. Chen couldn't shake the feeling that Justice understood something she didn't. The dog navigated with purpose, occasionally looking out the windows, but always returning his attention to the road ahead. 20 minutes later, they were at the warehouse district. The explosion site had been cleared months ago, but the lot remained empty, a rectangle of broken concrete and scattered debris that no developer wanted to touch. Justice led her to the northwestern corner, where the phantom van had been hidden in the photographs. The dog began searching immediately, his nose working the ground in the systematic pattern Marcus Kane had trained him to use. Back and forth, overlapping sweeps that covered every inch of available space. Dr. Chen watched him work, marveling at the precision of his search technique. Justice wasn't just sniffing randomly. He was following scent trails that were invisible to human senses, but clear as highways to his enhanced olfactory system. After 10 minutes, Justice stopped and began digging. His paws worked frantically, throwing dirt and concrete chips behind him as he excavated a hole in the ground. Dr. Chen knelt beside him, using her hands to help clear away debris. 3 feet down, they found a waterproof evidence bag, buried beneath layers of rubble and fill dirt. Inside the waterproof bag was a digital camera and a folder of documents that should have been destroyed in the explosion. Dr. Chen's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Justice pressed against her side as if offering moral support. The first document was a handwritten note in Detective Sarah Chen's familiar script. "If you're reading this, they got to me. Marcus isn't dirty. He's been trying to expose the real corruption. Captain Morrison is working with the Castellano family. They've been using the evidence lockup as a money laundering operation for 2 years. Tommy Rodriguez found out and tried to go to internal affairs. That's why they're killing him. The warehouse meeting was a setup. They're planning to frame Marcus for Tommy's murder and eliminate all 3 of us. I've hidden this evidence in case I don't make it out. The bomb is real. Justice can smell the accelerants. He's been trying to warn us all week, but we thought he was reacting to stress. If something happens to me, Marcus Kane is innocent. The real killer is..." The note ended there, torn off mid-sentence as if Sarah had been interrupted. Dr. Chen turned to the camera with shaking hands. The digital display showed dozens of photos taken over several weeks. Surveillance shots of Captain Morrison meeting with known criminals, pictures of evidence bags being removed from the police lockup, photos of the warehouse district taken from different angles, showing vehicles and people who had never appeared in the official investigation, and then, in the final photos, something that made Dr. Chen's blood freeze. Pictures of the van. The same van that had disappeared from the crime scene. But these photos showed the license plate clearly, along with the man loading equipment into the back, Assistant District Attorney Michael Brennan, the prosecutor who had built the case against Marcus Kane, the man who had argued passionately for the death penalty. claiming that a corrupt cop who murdered his partner deserved the ultimate punishment. Justice whined softly, pressing closer to Dr. Chen as she scrolled through the images. In the last photo, Brennan was clearly visible, loading what appeared to be explosive devices into the van, his face caught in perfect profile by Sarah Chen's telephoto lens. "Oh my God," Dr. Chen whispered. "We convicted an innocent man." Justice's response was immediate and decisive. He grabbed the evidence bag in his teeth and began trotting toward the car, his body language urgent and determined. But as Dr. Chen stood to follow him, her phone rang. "Dr. Chen, this is Warden Patterson. I'm afraid there's been a complication with the execution schedule." Her heart leaped. "Has it been postponed?" "No, ma'am. It's been moved up. New evidence has come to light that confirms Kane's guilt beyond any shadow of a doubt. The execution will proceed at 6 a.m. tomorrow instead of midnight." Dr. Chen looked at her watch. 11 p.m. 7 hours until they killed an innocent man. "What evidence?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Assistant District Attorney Brennan discovered additional explosive materials in Kane's personal locker. Materials that match the warehouse bomb perfectly. Kane's guilt is now unquestionable." The frame was being completed. Brennan was tying up loose ends, making sure that Marcus Kane died before anyone could discover the truth. "Sir, I need to speak with you about new evidence that—" "I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, but the case is closed. Kane will be executed as scheduled." The line went dead. Justice was already at the car, pawing at the door handle. When Dr. Chen unlocked the vehicle, the dog jumped into the driver's seat and barked once, sharp and commanding. "You're right," she said, sliding behind the wheel. "We need to get this evidence to someone who can help." But as she started the engine, a black SUV pulled into the lot behind them. The same type of vehicle that had been parked outside the warehouse 8 months ago. Justice's hackles rose and he began growling, a low, dangerous sound that spoke of imminent violence. Through the SUV's windshield, Dr. Chen could see the silhouette of a man talking on a cell phone. As he gestured, she caught a glimpse of his profile. Assistant District Attorney Michael Brennan. "He's been watching us," she whispered to Justice. "He knew we'd come here eventually." The dog's growl intensified as Brennan stepped out of the SUV. He was alone, but Dr. Chen could see the bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket. His face wore the expression of a man who had killed before and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. "Dr. Chen," Brennan called across the lot, "I think you have something that belongs to me." She gunned the engine and tore out of the lot, leaving. Brennan scrambling back to his vehicle. In the rearview mirror, she could see his headlights following, maintaining a steady distance that suggested he was in no hurry to catch them. He was herding them, driving them toward something. Justice barked twice and pawed at the passenger window, pointing toward a side street that would take them away from the main roads. Dr. Chen turned without hesitation, trusting the dog's instincts over her own knowledge of the city. For 20 minutes, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the empty streets. Every time Dr. Chen thought she'd lost Brennan, his headlights would appear again, always from a different direction. He wasn't just following them. He was coordinating with someone else. Justice's agitation was growing by the minute. The dog kept looking at his watch, something Dr. Chen hadn't even known he could do, and whining with increasing urgency. "You know what time it is," she realized. "You know how long Marcus has left?" Justice barked once. Confirmation. 6 hours and 17 minutes until execution. Dr. Chen made a decision that would have seemed insane 48 hours ago. She pulled into an all-night diner, grabbed the evidence bag, and followed Justice toward the building. "I need to use your phone," she told the startled waitress. "It's a police emergency." But when she tried to call the FBI field office, the line was dead. Her cell phone showed no signal, despite being in the middle of the city. Brennan's people were jamming communications in the area. Justice tugged at her jacket, leading her toward the diner's back exit. In the alley behind the building, he began pawing at a storm drain cover. "What are you—" Dr. Chen began, then stopped as she understood. The storm drains connected to the municipal tunnel system, a network of maintenance passages that ran beneath the entire city, including the county jail. Justice had found them an underground route to Marcus Kane. But as Dr. Chen knelt to lift the heavy metal cover, she heard the distinctive sound of multiple vehicles surrounding the building. Through the diner's windows, she could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Brennan had brought backup. Justice whined urgently and pushed against the storm drain cover with his shoulder. Together they managed to shift the heavy metal aside, revealing a ladder that led down into darkness. Dr. Chen grabbed a flashlight from her car's emergency kit and climbed down into the tunnel system, Justice right behind her. Above them, she could hear boots on concrete and voices shouting orders. They were in the maze now, racing against time and armed men who would kill to protect their secret. But they weren't alone in the tunnels. As they moved through the underground passages, Justice's behavior changed. His ears perked up, and he began moving with the focused intensity of a dog following a specific scent trail. Someone else was down here. Someone Justice recognized. 20 minutes of crawling through narrow maintenance passages brought them to a larger tunnel that ran directly beneath the county jail. Justice stopped at an intersection and barked softly, the alert signal that meant he'd found what he was looking for. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and Dr. Chen nearly screamed before she recognized him. Detective Tommy Rodriguez. Alive. His face was a roadmap of scars from the warehouse explosion, and his left arm hung useless at his side. But his eyes were clear and focused, and he was holding a police radio that crackled with official chatter. "Hello, Sarah," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for someone to find the truth." Dr. Chen stared at Tommy Rodriguez as if he were a ghost. In many ways, he was officially dead for 8 months, mourned by the department, eulogized as a hero who died fighting corruption. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered. Tommy's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "Yeah, well, being dead has its advantages. Makes it easier to investigate your own murder." Justice approached Tommy cautiously, his body language confused. The dog's training told him this was Pac, someone to be protected, but 8 months of believing Tommy was dead had created a cognitive dissonance that Justice couldn't resolve. Tommy knelt slowly, favoring his damaged arm, and extended his good hand toward Justice. "Hey boy, I know this is confusing. It's confusing for me too." The dog sniffed Tommy's hand, processing scents that confirmed what his eyes were telling him. This was the man he'd tried to save in the warehouse. This was Pac, alive. Justice's tail began wagging, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm as the cognitive puzzle pieces fell into place. "How are you alive?" Dr. Chen asked, still struggling to process what she was seeing. "Marcus saved me," Tommy replied, scratching behind Justice's ears. "He threw himself over me when the bomb went off, took most of the blast damage himself. I was buried under debris for 6 hours before I could dig my way out. But the body they found wasn't mine. They found Morrison's body in the rubble and assumed it was me. The explosion damage was so severe that DNA identification took weeks. By the time they figured out the truth, I was already in hiding." Dr. Chen felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "You've been investigating this whole time," Tommy nodded. "Morrison was just middle management. The corruption goes all the way to the top. Judges, prosecutors, police brass. They've been using the evidence lockup to launder money for the Castellano family for years. When I stumbled onto it, they decided to eliminate everyone who knew, including Marcus. Marcus was never supposed to survive the warehouse explosion. They planted evidence in his locker afterward to make sure he'd be blamed for my death. Classic setup. The dirty cop who kills his partner to cover his tracks. Justice was pressing against Tommy now, seeking the physical comfort of Pac contact. The dog's relief at finding Tommy alive was palpable, but Dr. Chen could see the anxiety still radiating from his posture. Marcus was still in danger. Marcus was still going to die in less than 6 hours. "We have evidence," Dr. Chen said, showing Tommy the camera and documents. "Sarah Chen documented everything before she died. We can prove Marcus is innocent." Tommy's expression darkened. "Evidence won't matter if we can't get it to the right people. Brennan has contacts throughout the system. Judges, federal agents, even some people in internal affairs. They'll bury this just like they buried the truth about the warehouse." Then, "What do we do?" Tommy stood wincing as his damaged arm protested the movement. "We go public. Media, social networks, whatever it takes to get the truth out before they execute Marcus. But as he spoke, his radio crackled with an update that made all three of them freeze. All units, be advised that Dr. Sarah Chen is wanted for questioning, in connection with evidence tampering. She was last seen at the warehouse district in the company of a police K9. Both are considered armed and dangerous. Dr. Chen felt the net closing around them. They're painting me as Marcus's accomplice. Standard protocol, Tommy said grimly. Discredit the witness before they can testify. By tomorrow morning, you'll be just another criminal trying to save her partner in crime. Justice was pacing now, his anxiety reaching a crescendo. The dog kept looking toward the tunnel that led to the jail, then back at Tommy and Dr. Chen. His body language was clear. Time is running out. There's something else, Tommy said quietly. Something I haven't told you about the warehouse explosion. Dr. Chen waited, dreading what she was about to hear. The bomb was on a timer, but it also had a remote detonator. Someone triggered it manually when they saw Marcus trying to save me. Brennan? That's what I thought, but I've been studying the blast pattern, the timing, the sequence of events. Whoever triggered that detonator was watching from inside the warehouse. Dr. Chen felt ice forming in her veins. Someone else was there, someone we haven't identified. Tommy nodded. Someone who wanted to make sure there were no survivors to tell the real story. Someone who's been pulling strings from the beginning to make sure Marcus takes the fall. Above them, they could hear the sound of boots on metal. Brennan's people had found their way into the tunnel system. Justice's ears perked up, and he began, moving deeper into the tunnels with the purposeful gait of a dog following a specific route. Tommy and Dr. Chen followed, their flashlights cutting weak paths through the darkness. Where's he going? Dr. Chen asked. To Marcus, Tommy replied. Dogs can navigate by scent even in places they've never been. Justice has been tracking Marcus's location this whole time. They climbed through maintenance passages and utility corridors, Justice leading them through a maze that would have been impossible for humans to navigate alone. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Finally, Justice stopped at a grate that opened into a sub-basement beneath the county jail. Through the metal bars, they could see the foundations of the death row cell block. We're directly under Marcus's cell, Tommy whispered. Justice began pawing at the grate, his claws finding purchase on the metal frame. The grate was designed to be removable for maintenance access, but it required tools they didn't have. That's when Dr. Chen heard it, a sound that made her heart stop, scratching. Coming from the other side of the grate, someone was scratching against the concrete floor above them, following the same pattern Justice had carved into his kennel wall. Marcus knows we're here, she whispered. Tommy pressed his face against the grate and called softly, Marcus, Marcus, can you hear me? Can you hear me? The scratching stopped. Then a voice drifted down through the ventilation system. Weak but unmistakably Marcus Kane. Tommy? Is that really you? Yeah, partner. I'm here. And I've got Justice with me. Above them they could hear movement. Marcus was positioning himself as close to the grate as possible. They moved up the execution, Marcus said. 6 a.m. They're not even going to wait for appeals. We know, Tommy replied. We've got evidence that proves you're innocent. Sarah Chen documented everything before she died. It won't matter. Brennan controls too much of the system. He'll bury the evidence just like he buried the truth about the warehouse. Justice whined softly, pressing his nose against the grate, as if he could somehow reach through metal and concrete to comfort his partner. Justice, Marcus called. Are you there, boy? The dog's response was immediate, a soft woof that somehow conveyed 8 months of separation, loyalty, and unbreakable love. I'm sorry I couldn't protect Tommy, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry I failed you both. Tommy was crying now, tears streaming down his scarred face. You didn't fail anyone, Marcus. You saved my life, and Justice never stopped believing in you. Above them, the sounds of pursuit had reached the sub-basement. Flashlight beams were cutting through the darkness, searching for their hiding spot. You have to go, Marcus said urgently. If they catch you down there, they'll kill you both. But Justice had other ideas. The dog began barking, not the controlled alerts of his training, but the wild, desperate barks of an animal in crisis. The sound echoed through the tunnel system, bouncing off concrete walls until it became a cacophony that filled the entire underground network. "What's he doing?" Dr. Chen asked. Tommy understood first. "He's calling for help. Justice is trained to alert when he finds survivors in collapsed buildings. He's treating this like a rescue operation." Above them, alarms began blaring throughout the jail. Justice's barking had triggered the facility's emergency response protocols, systems designed to detect structural damage or collapse in the underground areas. Emergency teams would be responding within minutes. Media crews would follow, drawn by the chaos and confusion. Justice had just created the public spectacle they needed to expose the truth, but they still had to survive the next few minutes. Brennan's voice echoed through the tunnels, closer now. "I know you're down here, Dr. Chen. There's nowhere left to run." Tommy grabbed the evidence bag and pressed it into Dr. Chen's hands. "Get this to the media crews when they arrive. I'll hold them off." "Tommy, no. I've been dead for 8 months." "What's a few more minutes?" Justice barked once more, then fell silent. Above them, they could hear Marcus's voice calling through the ventilation system. "Justice! Find help, boy! Find help!" The dog looked at Dr. Chen with eyes that held the weight of absolute trust. Then he turned and began running back through the tunnels, following a scent trail that would lead him to the surface, to the media crews that were already gathering outside the jail, to the people who could broadcast the truth before Marcus Kane died for crimes he didn't commit. Dr. Chen followed Justice through the maze of tunnels, leaving Tommy to face Brennan's team alone. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of confrontation beginning, shouts, the scrape of metal on concrete, the distinctive crack of Tommy's police radio hitting the tunnel wall. But ahead of her, Justice was running with the focused determination of a dog who had finally found his mission. They were going to save Marcus Kane. They were going to expose the truth, and they were going to do it in front of the entire world. The real story was about to begin. Justice burst from the storm drain, into the pre-dawn darkness like a force of nature. His paws hit asphalt running, and he didn't slow down as he crossed the street toward the gathering crowd of media vans and emergency vehicles. The jail's alarm system had worked exactly as intended. Within minutes of Justice's underground barking, every news station in the city had dispatched crews to cover what they assumed was a structural emergency at the county facility. What they found instead was a German shepherd covered in tunnel dirt, carrying something in his mouth that would change everything. Dr. Chen emerged from the drain 30 seconds behind Justice, clutching the evidence bag and gasping for breath. The dog had positioned himself directly in front of the largest news van, sitting at perfect attention, despite the chaos around him. Channel 7's lead investigative reporter, Maria Santos, was the first to notice them. "Are you Dr. Sarah Chen?" Santos called out, recognition dawning in her eyes. The medical examiner wanted for questioning. Dr. Chen could have run, should have run. Every instinct told her to disappear into the crowd and try to find another way to expose the truth. Instead, she walked directly to the cameras. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "And I have evidence that proves Marcus Kane is innocent of murdering Detective Tommy Rodriguez." The effect was immediate. Every camera swung toward her, every microphone thrust in her direction. Behind the reporters, she could see jail security pushing through the crowd, trying to reach her before she could say more. But Justice had positioned himself between Dr. Chen and the approaching guards. The dog's body language had shifted into something Dr. Chen had never seen before. Not the controlled alertness of police training, but the primal protective stance of a wolf defending his pack. 8 months ago, Dr. Chen continued, raising her voice over the growing commotion, Detective Rodriguez uncovered a money laundering operation involving police evidence and the Castellano crime family. When he tried to report it, they set up a meeting to kill him. The security guards were closer now, but Maria Santos stepped between them and Dr. Chen, her cameraman capturing every moment. "What evidence do you have?" Santos demanded. Dr. Chen held up the waterproof bag. "Photographs and documents hidden by Detective Sarah Chen before she died in the warehouse explosion. Evidence that proves Assistant District Attorney Michael Brennan was involved in the conspiracy. At the mention of Brennan's name, the crowd went electric. The ADA was a rising political star, mentioned as a future candidate for Attorney General. Accusations against him would create a media firestorm. That's enough. Security Chief Williams pushed through the crowd, his hand on his weapon. "Dr. Chen, you're under arrest for evidence tampering and obstruction of justice," Justice growled. A sound that froze everyone within 20 feet. The dog rose to his feet, placing himself squarely between Williams and Dr. Chen. His hackles were raised, and his amber eyes held a promise of violence that made the security chief step backward. "Your dog is threatening a law enforcement officer," Williams said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Justice isn't my dog," Dr. Chen replied. "He's Marcus Kane's partner, and he's been trying to tell us the truth for 8 months. She knelt beside Justice and opened the evidence bag, spreading photographs across the asphalt where every camera could see them. These pictures show Brennan loading explosive devices into a van at the warehouse district, the same van that disappeared. From the crime scene after the explosion, Maria Santos grabbed one of the photographs, holding it up to her camera. This appears to show Assistant District Attorney Brennan with what could be explosive materials. "Those photos are fabricated," a new voice cut through the crowd. Ada Brennan himself emerged from a black sedan, flanked by federal agents. "Dr. Chen is a desperate woman trying to save her lover from execution." The word lover was calculated, designed to discredit Dr. Chen's testimony by implying a romantic relationship with Marcus Kane. But Brennan had made a crucial mistake. Justice's reaction was immediate and decisive. The dog charged directly at Brennan, not attacking, but using his trained scent detection skills in full view of the cameras. Justice circled the ADA, his nose working frantically, then sat and barked once, the clear alert signal that meant he'd found what he was looking for. "What's he doing?" Santos asked. Dr. Chen understood immediately. "Justice is trained to detect explosives. He's alerting on residue." Brennan went pale. "That's impossible. The dog is confused." But Justice wasn't done. He moved to Brennan's sedan and repeated the performance, alerting at the trunk with the same precision he'd shown with the ADA himself. "I think we need to search that vehicle," one of the federal agents said quietly. Brennan's composure finally cracked. "You can't search my car without a warrant." "Actually," Agent Morrison said, "if a trained police dog alerts on explosive residue, that gives us probable cause." The irony wasn't lost on Dr. Chen. Agent Morrison shared a name with the corrupt captain who had started this nightmare. But this Morrison seemed genuinely interested in the truth. They found the accelerants in Brennan's trunk. Enough explosive material to level a city block, along with remote detonators and timer devices that matched the components used in the warehouse bombing. But the real revelation came when they opened Brennan's briefcase. Inside were documents that laid out the entire conspiracy, payoffs from the Castellano family, schedules for evidence tampering, and a detailed plan to eliminate Rodriguez, Sarah Chen, and Marcus Kane. The briefcase also contained something that made Dr. Chen's blood run cold, a remote detonator with today's date programmed into it. Brennan hadn't just planned to frame Marcus Kane for murder. He'd planned to bomb the execution chamber, eliminating Marcus and anyone else who might have learned the truth. "Jesus Christ," Agent Morrison whispered. "He was going to kill everyone in the building." Justice sat beside Dr. Chen, his tail wagging. For the first time in months. The dog's mission was nearly complete, but there was still one more piece of the puzzle. Where was Detective Tommy Rodriguez? The answer came in the form of an explosion of concrete dust from the jail's foundation. Tommy Rodriguez emerged from the same storm drain Dr. Chen and Justice had used, supported by 2 federal agents who had followed Brennan's team into the tunnels. He was alive, battered, bleeding from a dozen cuts, but alive, and he was carrying something that would complete their case. "I found Morrison's real body," Tommy announced to the crowd, "hidden in a sealed section of the tunnel system where Brennan's people put it after they realized the warehouse explosion hadn't destroyed the evidence they needed." Tommy held up a police badge and weapon, Captain Morrison's, preserved in the dry environment of the sealed tunnel. "Morrison tried to back out of the conspiracy at the last minute," Tommy continued, Brennan killed him before the warehouse meeting and used his body as a convenient way to fake my death. The media frenzy reached a crescendo as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about one corrupt cop or a single murder. This was about a conspiracy that reached into every level of law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, and potentially the courts themselves. But there was still one question that needed answering. "Where's Marcus Kane?" Dr. Chen asked Agent Morrison, the key. Federal agent checked his watch. The execution was supposed to happen in 47 minutes, but given these revelations, I think we can safely say that's been postponed indefinitely. Justice barked once, sharp and urgent. The dog was staring at the jail building, his body tense with anxiety. "What is it, boy?" Dr. Chen knelt beside him. Justice whined and pawed at her jacket, then began trotting toward the jail entrance. His message was clear. Marcus is still in danger. And suddenly Dr. Chen understood why. Brennan might be in custody, but the conspiracy was bigger than one man. There were others involved, others who might decide that killing Marcus Kane was worth the risk of exposure, others who had access to the death row facility. "We need to get to Marcus," she told Agent Morrison. "Now." The death row cell block was supposed to be the most secure area of the county jail. Steel doors, electronic locks, armed guards at every checkpoint. But as Dr. Chen, Agent Morrison, and Justice raced through the corridors, they found something that chilled them to the bone. Silence. No guards. No electronic chatter from the security stations. No sounds of normal operations. Justice's hackles were raised, and he was moving with the controlled alertness of a dog approaching enemy territory. His nose was working frantically, processing scents that told him stories the humans couldn't read. "This is wrong," Agent Morrison muttered into his radio. "Control, what's the status on death row security?" "Static." No response. They found the first guard at Checkpoint Alpha, unconscious but alive, a small dart protruding from his neck. The kind of tranquilizer dart that left no permanent damage but ensured silence for several hours. "Someone's been here," Dr. Chen whispered. Justice was already moving toward the death row cells, his body language shifting from alertness to barely controlled fury. The dog had identified multiple foreign scents in his territory, and his protective instincts were in overdrive. They found Marcus Kane's cell empty. The steel door hung open, electronic locks disengaged from the inside. There were signs of a struggle, overturned. Furniture, blood on the concrete floor, but no body. Justice put his nose to the blood and whined softly. It was Marcus's scent, but mixed with something else, something that made the dog's entire body vibrate with rage. "Can you track him?" Dr. Chen asked. Justice was already moving, following a scent trail that led deeper into the facility. Not toward the execution chamber, but toward a section of the jail that Dr. Chen had never seen before. The maintenance levels. They descended through service corridors and utility passages, following Justice through a maze of pipes and electrical conduits. The dog's pace was urgent now, his breathing quick and shallow with anxiety. Behind them, Agent Morrison was coordinating with federal backup teams, but Dr. Chen could barely hear his radio chatter over the sound of her own heartbeat. Every instinct. They told her they were walking into a trap, but Justice was determined to reach his partner, and Dr. Chen wasn't about to abandon him now. They found Marcus in a maintenance room 3 levels below the jail's main structure. He was alive but barely conscious, strapped to a chair with enough explosive material around him to level the entire building. Standing beside him was a figure Dr. Chen recognized but had never suspected. Judge Catherine Walsh, the woman who had presided over Marcus's trial and sentenced him to death. "Dr. Chen," Judge Walsh said calmly, "I was wondering when you'd arrive." The judge was holding a remote detonator in one hand and a pistol in the other. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, her judicial robes immaculate despite the underground setting. "You're part of this," Dr. Chen said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "I've been part of this from the beginning," Walsh replied. "The Castellano family has been very generous to certain members of the judiciary, enough to ensure that inconvenient cases never make it to trial." Marcus raised his head with obvious effort. His face was bruised, and there was dried blood at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were alert. "She was the one," he whispered. "The one giving orders in the warehouse. I heard her voice on Morrison's radio." Justice was trembling with barely contained violence. The dog could see his partner in danger, could smell the explosives, could sense the threat. But he was trained not to attack without a clear command, and Marcus was in no condition to give orders. The warehouse explosion was supposed to eliminate. "Haul the witnesses," Judge Walsh continued. "But you survived, Mr. Kane, and your dog kept drawing attention to inconsistencies in our carefully constructed narrative." She gestured toward Justice with the pistol. "We tried to have him euthanized quietly, but the media attention made that impossible, so we decided to handle this more directly." Agent Morrison stepped into the room behind Dr. Chen, his weapon drawn. "Judge Walsh, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and terrorism." Walsh smiled, a cold expression that transformed her grandmotherly features into something predatory. "Agent Morrison, I don't think you understand the scope of what you're dealing with. This operation has protection at the federal level. Your own supervisors are invested in maintaining the status quo." She held up the detonator. "One button press, and this entire facility comes down. Marcus Kane dies as a terrorist who bombed the jail rather than face execution. Dr. Chen and a federal agent die as unfortunate casualties. Justice is just another victim of his owner's violence." "The media knows the truth," Dr. Chen said. "Brennan's in custody. The evidence is already public. Evidence can be discredited. Brennan will suffer an unfortunate suicide in his cell tonight. Your testimony becomes the ravings of a woman who died in a terrorist attack." Judge Walsh's finger tightened on the detonator button. That's when Marcus spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the confined space. "Justice, free." It wasn't a command the dog had been taught in formal training, but it was a concept Justice understood on a level deeper than words. Free to protect his pack, free to use whatever force was necessary, free to be the weapon Marcus had always known he could be. Justice moved like black lightning. He covered the distance to Judge Walsh in 3 bounds, his body a blur of muscle and determination. The judge tried to bring her pistol around, but Justice was already airborne. 90 pounds of trained fury aimed at her gun hand. The impact sent Walsh crashing into the wall. The pistol clattered across the floor, but she maintained her grip on the detonator. "I'll bring it all down," she screamed, her finger stabbing toward the button. But Justice wasn't done. The dog's jaws clamped down on Walsh's wrist with surgical precision, enough pressure to immobilize her hand without crushing bone. It was a move Marcus had trained him to use on armed suspects, designed to disarm without causing permanent damage. Agent Morrison secured the detonator, while Dr. Chen began cutting Marcus free from his restraints. Justice maintained his grip on Walsh's wrist, his amber eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her stop struggling. "Good boy," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with 8 months of separation and relief. "Good boy." Justice's tail wagged. Once, but he didn't release his hold on Walsh until Agent Morrison had her properly restrained. Only then did the dog return to Marcus, pressing against his partner's legs as if he could somehow absorb the pain of their separation through physical contact. Marcus reached down with shaking hands and buried his fingers in Justice's fur. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "I thought they'd make you forget me." Justice's response was to press closer, his entire body vibrating with the relief of being reunited with his pack leader. "Never," Dr. Chen said softly. "He never stopped believing in you." Above them they could hear the sounds of federal agents securing the facility. The conspiracy was unraveling rapidly, now that Judge Walsh was in custody. Phone records, financial documents, and recorded conversations would expose the full scope of the corruption. But in that moment, in the depths of the jail where it had almost ended, there was only a man and his dog together again after 8 months of separation and injustice. Justice had kept his promise. He had found the truth. He had protected his pack, and Marcus Kane was finally going home. 6 months later, the morning sun filtered through the windows of the small cabin Marcus had rented in the mountains, 3 hours from the city where his life had almost ended. Justice lay beside the fireplace, his chin resting on his paws as he watched Marcus prepare breakfast. The dog's coat gleamed with health, but there were grey hairs around his muzzle that hadn't been there before the trial. 8 months of stress had aged them both, leaving marks that would never fully fade. Marcus moved carefully around the kitchen, his left leg still stiff from injuries sustained in the warehouse explosion. The doctor said the limp would be permanent, a reminder of the night that changed everything. But he was alive. They were both alive, and that was more than anyone had expected 8 months ago. The federal investigation had uncovered a corruption network that reached into 17 states. Judge Walsh, Assistant District Attorney Brennan, and 43 other officials were awaiting trial on charges ranging from racketeering to murder. The Castellano crime family had been decimated, their money laundering operation exposed to the light of federal scrutiny. Detective Tommy Rodriguez had returned to active duty, though he'd been reassigned to a different department. The physical scars from the warehouse explosion would always mark him, but his testimony had been crucial in bringing down the conspiracy. Dr. Sarah Chen had been cleared of all charges and commended for her role in exposing the truth. She'd returned to her position as medical examiner, but Marcus knew she carried her own invisible scars from the investigation, and Detective Sarah Chen, Marcus's former partner, had been posthumously awarded the department's highest honor for her courage in documenting the conspiracy even as it cost her life. But it was the quiet moments that mattered most to Marcus. Mornings like this, when he could sit with Justice and remember what peace felt like. The dog's ears perked up at the sound of a car approaching on the gravel road. Justice rose smoothly to his feet, moving to the window with the alert posture that had never fully left him, but his tail was wagging. Whoever was coming, Justice recognized them as friendly. Marcus opened the door to find Dr. Chen standing on his porch, holding a manila envelope and wearing the kind of smile that suggested good news. "Sarah," he said, genuine warmth in his voice, "what brings you all the way up here?" "Official business," she replied, scratching behind Justice's ears as the dog greeted her, "and maybe a little curiosity about how you two are adjusting to civilian life." They sat on the porch overlooking the valley, Justice positioned between them like a furry bridge connecting their separate worlds. Dr. Chen opened the envelope and handed Marcus a document that made his breath catch. "The department wants you back," she said. "Full reinstatement, back pay, and a formal apology for the wrongful conviction." Marcus studied the paperwork, but his eyes kept drifting to Justice. The dog was relaxed but alert, watching the forest, around their cabin with the eternal vigilance of a protector. "What about Justice?" Marcus asked. "Is he cleared for active duty?" Dr. Chen smiled. "According to his psychological evaluation, Justice shows no signs of trauma or behavioral issues. In fact, his performance during the investigation exceeded all expectations for a police canine." She paused, watching Justice track a hawk circling overhead. "But there's something else. The department is offering you a choice. You can return to active duty with Justice as your partner, or you can retire with full benefits. The pension board fast-tracked your application as compensation for the wrongful imprisonment." Marcus looked at Justice, who seemed to sense the importance of the conversation. The dog's amber eyes met his, and Marcus saw something that surprised him: contentment. For 8 months, Justice had been driven by mission, by the desperate need to clear his partner's name and expose the truth. But now, with the conspiracy unraveled and their bond restored, the dog seemed peaceful. "What do you think, boy?" Marcus asked quietly. "Ready to go back to work?" Justice's response was immediate. He rose, walked to his old tactical vest hanging by the door, and sat beside it in perfect attention posture. The message was clear. "Where? You go, I go. Whatever you choose, we choose together." Dr. Chen laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I think that's your answer." Marcus stood and walked to the vest, lifting it with reverence. Justice had worn this gear through dozens of operations, hundreds of training exercises, and one impossible investigation that had saved both their lives. As he fastened the familiar straps around Justice's chest, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. They were a team again. They were a team, partners in the truest sense, and the world needed what they could offer. "When do we start?" Marcus asked. "Tomorrow, if you're ready. There's a new K9 unit being formed. an elite team focused on investigating corruption within law enforcement. They want you and Justice to lead it. Marcus looked at Justice, who was sitting tall and proud in his tactical vest. The dog's tail wagged once, and Marcus saw the future stretching out before them. More investigations, more conspiracies to unravel, more truth to uncover, more chances to protect the innocent and bring justice to those who thought themselves above the law. "We're ready," Marcus said. As Dr. Chen drove away, Marcus and Justice stood on the porch watching the sun climb higher over the mountains. The valley spread out below them, green and peaceful and full of possibilities. Justice pressed against Marcus's leg, and Marcus felt the weight of their shared history, the partnership forged in training, tested in combat, broken by betrayal, and reborn through loyalty that transcended human understanding. "Come on, partner," Marcus said finally. "Let's go to work." Justice barked once, sharp and clear and full of purpose. They walked toward the future together, a man and his dog, ready to face whatever darkness waited in the world below. Behind them, the morning light illuminated the cabin that had been their sanctuary, their place of healing. But ahead lay their true calling, the pursuit of justice in a world that desperately needed protectors. And in the distance, barely audible over the mountain wind, came the sound that had started it all. A whisper. Carried on the breeze like a prayer or a promise. The whisper that had stopped time in an execution chamber and changed everything that followed. The whisper that had saved them both. "Find the truth, boy. No matter how deep they bury it, find the truth." Justice's ears twitched at the phantom sound, and his amber eyes gleamed with the reflected light of justice itself. The real story was just beginning. In that execution chamber, when Marcus Kane whispered those final words to Justice, he wasn't just saying goodbye to his partner. He was passing on a mission that would span months, cost lives, and ultimately expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement. Some say Justice was just a well-trained police dog following his instincts. Others believe he understood something deeper, that loyalty isn't just about following orders, but about protecting the truth even when the world has decided to bury it. What do you believe? Was Justice simply reacting to scents and sounds his training had taught him to recognize? Or was there something more? A connection between partners that transcends the boundaries between human and animal? A bond that can survive betrayal, separation, and even the threat of death itself? The warehouse explosion should have ended their story. The corrupt system should have succeeded in silencing the truth. Marcus Kane should have died for crimes he didn't commit. But sometimes, the most powerful force in the world isn't money, or power, or conspiracy. Sometimes, it's just a dog who refuses to give up on his partner. What stories of loyalty and determination have changed your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove reality is stranger than fiction. Because in a world where corruption can reach the highest levels of power, sometimes justice comes, on four paws, with amber eyes that see through lies and a heart that never stops believing in the truth. The next time someone tells you it's just a dog, remember justice. Remember Marcus Kane. Remember that some bonds are stronger than steel, deeper than fear, and more powerful than any conspiracy designed to destroy them.